Well, hello everybody. This is Patricia Warby from Alchemy Therapies. And today I've got a special request. I love this. It's like being a DJ. I'm a YouTube DJ, folks, or VJ, whatever. One of the people subscribed to my channel contacted me recently, which is lovely, by the way. I don't have a huge number of subscribers, but the ones I do are very involved, and that's marvelous. Um, don't forget, by the way, if you haven't subscribed, please do, and you'll help build my channel. But anyway, this lady has contacted me because she noticed I'd done a couple of reviews of the book by Arthur Firstenberg called The Invisible Rainbow. And in the second of those reviews, I said I would cover something else in part 3, and I never recorded part 3, so well spotted. Carol, you know who you are. So I think today, actually, it's really apt for me to record part 3 for that, because something that's happened to me recently has really brought into focus the quality of healing and why human beings are really susceptible to disease and breakdown, for a very, very good reason that's not chemical, it's electrical. And that's what Arthur Firstenberg's book is all about. It's the electrical nature of the human experience and the world we live in. And in the first 2 parts, I covered some of the diseases that he believes are eminently linked to, first the spread of radio waves in the world, and then radar, and more recently Wi-Fi and all the kind of satellite and microwave technology that we're saturated with now. So, but what I wanted to cover today was more to do with nerves and regeneration and healing, because as you may or may not know, I've damaged my shoulder very badly, and a rotator cuff injury, which is slowly, I can do about that now, so, which takes many months to heal. Now, I've been treating this obviously with standard physiotherapy exercises, making sure I've got plenty of vitamin C, because there's a lot of soft tissue damage, and vitamin C is really important for connective tissue. But there's other things I've been doing, like infrared radiation treatment, and I've been using a device called a DANAS machine as well, which has micro electrical pulses, which are very helpful in healing, but you have to choose the right pulse, and I've got it wrong on a couple of occasions, and pain has ensued. But anyway, so healing is not just a chemical activity, okay? Living is not just a chemical activity, but it's intimately linked to the electrical nature of the human experience. So let's call it the electrochemistry, which is probably more accurate. And Arthur has written a fabulous book, and he's drawn together so much information about the world we live in, and our human bodies, and all the data. It's extremely well referenced. And he was noting that, very interestingly, we have certain chemicals in our body called porphyrins. One of the most famous is haemoglobin, which contains a porphyrin molecule. Now, a porphyrin molecule is a sort of highly resonant, very highly bonded structure that holds electrons very well without dissipating them. So it's a great transmitter of energy. So that's probably the most famous. The other one is chlorophyll, which you'll find in the leaves of plants, which enables them to transfer energy from sunlight into sugars. And we do the opposite. We burn sugars to release oxygen with hemoglobin. And also there's a porphyrin molecule in the electron transport chain in our cells as well, in the mitochondria. And cytochrome C is one of the most famous ones. And problems with cytochrome C often cause people energy issues, like having chronic fatigue syndrome. And chronic fatigue syndrome has been, along with a number of other recent sort of diseases, been very difficult to pinpoint why people get this. And the electrical pollution aspect has never really been looked at. But I do know very many people who are highly sensitive to electronic equipment and or cell towers and so on. And, you know, I have a colleague, in fact, who's so sensitive, she can only do up to half an hour each time on Wi-Fi. And in fact, it's better for her to have it plugged in. But even so, being by a computer or near a computer is actually very damaging. And I have noticed also, I love to listen to and watch videos on diverse subjects, from consciousness to sort of why we're here, and biology and psychology. And I often do that in the evening on my cell phone. And I plug in headphones, wired headphones actually, because I don't want those kinds that transmit Bluetooth into my body. But even so, I've noticed very interestingly a propensity to fall asleep, which isn't just because I'm tired. Obviously, I am towards the end of the day, but there's a definite dulling of my head where I just go to sleep. And as soon as I take the headphones off and go and make a cup of tea, I'm awake again. And it did occur to me, is this something physical that's going on, in my body, or is it just me being overtired? But having gone through his book again, I'm thinking, no, it definitely is an electrical issue. Did you know that human brains are designed to work where there's an electrical charge from the back to the front? And if you reverse that polarity and put a charge in the front to the back, anaesthesia is virtually guaranteed. It works in animals too. So it could be the way anesthetics work, is they reverse polarity, electrical charge. We've never satisfactorily been able to explain why anesthetic works. So that could be something that's been missed, because biochemistry does not look at biophysics. The two domains are very separate. So anesthesia and pain reduction can also work via this transfer of electrical charge. And it's also really important in healing. And so healing my arm at the moment is very much both about working on the chemistry, but it's also working on the electrical charge and using some of the devices like my infrared device to kind of change the vibrational nature of the tissues. Adding infrared is a very regular and well-used biological wavelength. It's used by all cells to heal and regenerate. So putting more in, also taking certain highly colored chemicals, methylene blue, I'm adding that to my water. I'm also having natural products like celery juice and anything brightly colored in my foods to help build that capacity as well, because these are all resonant molecules. And we want more resonance and more healing. So that's what's going on at the moment for me. So it's really important to understand that the molecules that we're talking about, the porphyrins, have a strong pigmentation because they reflect light. In fact, the more fluorescent they are, the more efficient they are, the more they reflect light back. And they're good energy transmitters, and they work in all sorts of different parts of your body. So we've talked about in the mitochondria producing energy, but they also, interestingly, are contained in the nerves as well, which is something that most people aren't aware of. I know when I learned physiology, I was never taught that there were resonant molecules in the sheath, the myelin sheath that surrounds the nerve. Now, we used to think of the myelin sheath very much like insulation around a wire. And in fact, that was all it was considered to be for a very, very long time. But that isn't accurate. Myelin sheaths actually contain porphyrin molecules, one called porphyrin 3, they have horrible names, and protoporphyrin, in a ratio of 2:1 complexed with zinc. Now, in haemoglobin, you may know iron is the central molecule, all right? It's structured so that iron sits in the middle, and then there's these sort of rings around that, which creates the resonance. There must be a reason for having the iron molecule in the center. In plants, it's really interesting. They have a different molecule in the middle. That molecule is magnesium. And so both plants and animals use a metal molecule in the center of this resonant ring to transmit energy. So there's obviously a very important reason why that would happen. And the fact that myelin, which has long been considered just a packing material, if you like, also contains these resonant molecules, caught the eye of some researchers who were investigating electrical charge. And what they found was that there were certain things that if they poisoned the pathway that produced these resonant porphyrins, then conduction of the nerve tissue didn't flow properly. And we get what's called neurasthenia. It was called neurasthenia for years. We now tend to label it in different ways, but it's a sort of nervous system degeneration, which can eventually lead to conditions like multiple sclerosis. It's to do with the heavy metal buildup, because basically, remember that it's complexed with heavy metals in a particular proportion. But if you have an issue with the porphyrin manufacturing pathways, and you can't produce enough porphyrins to bind these heavy metals together, then excess porphyrins build up, certainly excess precursors, you know, the ones that go to make it, start to build up in the nervous system and the rest of the body. And this disrupts the myelin sheath's ability to transmit information and energy, which makes the excitability of the nerves very much greater. And so the entire nervous system becomes hypersensitive to stimuli of all kinds, including electromagnetic fields. But equally, I've seen over and over excessive sensitivity to emotions, to foods, to change of any kind. And so this hyperexcitability may be, there's a predisposition perhaps in some people around this porphyrin production. And certainly I have a genetic predisposition for that in my genetic makeup because I have had my DNA read. So could this be an explanation? I think so. See, we do know that the body is electric, okay? Robert O. Becker wrote a book, The Body Electric. It's a very famous book. It's a fabulous title. It's very poetic, the title. And it basically outlines the idea that we're not just chemistry, we're not just matter slung together. We actually have interactions between molecules that creates this electrical flow, which has long been known in ancient healing traditions like traditional Chinese medicine and some other cultures where electrical meridians, as they're called, are sort of electrical flow systems in the body. But modern medicine completely ignores that. So anyway, Becker began to investigate, thinking he knew already that proteins in the body were semiconductors, and he wanted to find out if bones were too, and maybe electron flow was the secret to the healing of fractures, because there are some conditions in which fractures do not mend properly, and modern surgical techniques sort of bind those two surfaces together and screw them and put plates in and so on. But is there a more natural way of encouraging bone formation? Because bones are not just made of collagen and apatite, which is the sort of crystal matrix, as we're all taught, but they're also doped with tiny amounts of copper, which and also boron to some degree, but mostly copper. And the presence of greater or lesser amounts of these metal atoms actually regulates the electrical activity of the circuitry, the same way as in semiconductors in computers. So the bones are a matrix, they're a liquid crystal matrix. And the components of that matrix obviously influence very highly how well the structure holds together. I've been shocked by the damage I've done to my body just by a simple fall, but you know, I'm doing everything I can to promote this healing. If we look at this electrical nature, though, it really accentuates our understanding of how we might be able to promote health and well-being in people. Now, we know that we've always looked at the idea that nerves conduct electricity. We know that. We've seen an action potential, which is a sort of voltage generated, which spreads an electrical signal along the nerve. We also know that at the end of the nerve, that little electrical signal generates neurotransmitter release at the synapse, which is the gap between one neuron and another. And so it is electrochemical. We've always known that. But it's not as simple as that, because the speed with which that can happen doesn't explain some of the extraordinary things we were able to do, playing the piano, dancing with someone else in perfect time, things that we're able to achieve at millisecond gaps. So Becker thought that maybe this couldn't explain everything, and that there had to be another mechanism, maybe a more primitive system, that we inherited from lower forms of life, because we've all evolved from lower forms of life, and a system that might be related to these acupuncture meridians in Chinese medicine. And he noticed, for one thing, that there is a feature when there's an injury in the body. On the surface of the skin, there'll be what's called currents of injury. These are a simple low voltage current that exists, but they were largely thought to be an artifact of damage. Nobody really understood. They thought they were meaningless. But we know that that's not true now, and that this potential, little millivolt difference could somehow be part of the healing information that the body is sending. Now, we've done experiments on salamanders, and salamanders are very interesting because they can regenerate legs and arms from severed limbs. So we can study maybe their electrical potential and see that if we block the current, does that affect the regeneration? And we in fact found that indeed that salamanders can regenerate without nerve innervation, but if you block the current, this polarization in salamanders, it's from back to front as it is in our human brain, then in fact the animal couldn't actually regenerate. So that's very interesting. Does that apply in humans? Yes, it seems to. As I've said, in anesthetic, in pain reversal, that does seem to be the case. So is it necessary for growth and development? Yes, it is. And therefore, maybe these currents of injury play a central role in healing. So that's one very important understanding. The second understanding that he found was that these myelin sheaths, sometimes also called Schwann cells, by the person who discovered it, start to grow across a gap during regeneration. And it takes about 6 days. And as soon as the sleeve grows over the severed nerve, then at least the signal can start to reinstigate. And it seems that the Schwann cells are central to this signaling. And we have obviously ignored that for years and thought it was only the neuron itself, not the surrounding tissue, that does anything. So the myelin containing cells in the brain, they're called glial cells, are not just packing material, they're not just insulation, they are central to the transmission of information within the body. And so these currents determine health and growth. And because they're a liquid crystalline, the semiconducting porphyrin component of that myelin is actually vital. So he deduced that these porphyrins actually play the central role in nerve conduction, not the nerve itself. Now, that's revolutionary. And the implications of this, of course, especially important for people with these chemical and electrical sensitivities, because it really does affect the way you feel if your nerves aren't functioning properly. And Exposure to electromagnetic fields simply makes the matter worse because it sensitizes even further. And it has the effect that maybe our zinc levels begin to rise because you can't complex the zinc enough because you're not producing enough of this porphyrin molecule. And so zinc starts to build up along with the porphyrin precursors in the brain, particularly, and there's a huge link with Alzheimer's disease there, but also in other parts of the body. And this indeed can cause all sorts of problems for us health-wise. Is it something that can be dealt with? Well, yes, apparently, if you add a complexing chemical like EDTA, which is a well-known complexer of heavy metals, it takes the heavy metals out of the body, then Alzheimer's is relieved. Cognitive decline actually is reversed. There are so many reasons why we need to look at this, because it's also linked perhaps to other conditions like diabetes and cancer and so on. But just understanding that it's dose dependent of the amount of zinc build up, which may not, by the way, be reflected in your blood levels, which is what I measured. And in fact, this is a really important point, that you can't simply measure the levels of zinc in your fatty tissues by measuring the amount in your blood, because it seems that the kidneys allow for that. And in fact, low levels in the blood may indicate that the kidneys are doing their best to eliminate the excess zinc by working overtime, but the buildup is still there in the fatty tissues of your brain and your nervous system. And so getting these important complexes out of the body is really, really key. Okay, so we found that the nerve cells are conducting with the use of the myelin itself, and that's a large proportion of the oxygen consumption in the brain. For instance, 90% of the oxygen consumption in the brain is not done by the brain's nerve cells, but by the myelin sheaths and the glial cells. So oxygen appears to be being consumed in the fatty myelin, which contain no mitochondria. So this is turning on its head years of understanding that the only way we produce energy is through the mitochondria in our cells. So maybe it's that the myelin is a form of sort of super mitochondrion, if you like. It's certainly an energy producing powerhouse, and enables the energy needs of our brain, which are huge, to be met. So healthy myelin is so key to having good mental cognitive ability. So they seem to work together. That's what he concluded, which is really important. So getting some form of treatment, if you're suffering from electrosensitivity, is having something that can complex out heavy metals from your body. And as I've said, EDTA is the most common one that people use. They sometimes use it after having dental work. If you've had amalgam fillings removed, you often have a huge surge of heavy metals in your bloodstream because it's absorbed through the parts of your mouth which are highly, they have large amounts of blood vessels in. So EDTA is well known as a complexer of metals. So getting that out of your system can certainly make a difference. Where do we get the zinc? Excess zinc doesn't just come in because it can't be got rid of. How is it coming in environmentally? It's coming in from our homes, industrial processes, galvanized metals, even some fillings have zinc in. It's in denture cream and motor oil and car tires. Okay, so road dust contains enormous amounts of zinc. And so if folks like me, you wash your car manually, make sure you wash your hands afterwards. Try not to breathe in dust, use plenty of water. But the problem is, of course, it's then entering the water supply as well. So we do know that zinc is coming in even after filtration. And taking zinc supplements, which I did for a while, believing my levels were low, actually can make things worse, of course. So getting that really understood. And chelation therapy, which is this addition of EDTA or some form of complex to take it out, may actually improve things. So it's understanding really the whole process and not just assuming that you need to take certain supplements. Understanding also that the blood levels may not reflect what's actually going on in your brain. So that's very interesting to me. I thought that was so key to understanding what's been going on for me, and this sort of brain foggy feeling I have after listening to things on headphones. Of course, it does bring into real context now what we're doing in our environment, and that the people that are electrosensitivities are in some senses canaries in the coal mine. I have noticed also that highly sensitive people, which I've done some talks on, may also correlate with these electrosensitive people. It's about the same proportion who are electrosensitive, 10 to 20%, as are highly sensitive generally. So could it be that we're the ones that have this problem in the porphyrin pathways? Good question. I'm not a researcher. I'd love to find out. So we tend to have a greater risk than everyone else to these chronic conditions that are a result of this potential electrochemical poisoning that we're all suffering. And it's everywhere. It's in the cell towers around you. It's in your internal electrical wiring. It's in your Wi-Fi router, folks. I promised I'd show you my Faraday cage. Here's my Faraday cage, which you can purchase. It fits over the router. The problem with modern routers is that if you switch them off, they get they have a sort of feedback mechanism to the network that says they're faulty. And so you may have an issue then thereafter with reducing your bandwidth. So this is the best solution really, is to put a Faraday cage over, which I do certainly at night. Some people can, if they've got a very good connection, can do during the day as well and still use their Wi-Fi. But just to kind of make sure that where you sleep is electrically denuded, don't have televisions in your bedroom, don't have your mobile phone next to you at night. Whether it's receiving a call or not, it's still emitting. Keep your devices away from the bedroom. When you sleep is the most important part of the electrical reorganization of your body. It's when you heal, it's when you restore cellular capacity. And finally, watch your diet. Have highly colored foods in your diet, because they help you to manufacture these porphyrin molecules and help to keep you resonant and alive. So any case, I highly recommend the book, The Invisible Rainbow, although it's not an easy read. It's extremely long. I think it's over 480 pages. Let's just check. With all the references, yes, no, it's 514 with all the references, and that's about 480 pages of writing. So it's extremely detailed. I'd love it if somebody could produce a book that kind of made it, a little more succinct. I guess that's why I decided to record these videos, just to kind of parcel out some of the information. And if any of this sounds interesting to you and you'd like to get in touch with me, please find me on alchemytherapies.co.uk, where I help people overcome all manner of irregularities in their system, encouraging the healing response psychotherapeutically. But I work through the body, not through talking. And also investigate some of my courses, which can be found on my website as well. And I'll look forward to seeing you soon. Take care, everyone. Bye for now.